Our first team list of 2025 are in. We've got 2 games to talk about, a bunch of fantasy implications, and some stuff that I think is being overblown. But first things first, we have Jay-Z in the studio, the man who came 4th last year and the coach of the hard-earned index. How you doing, mate?
Mate, fantastic. Last year was a great year. My personal best finish. It's a shame I couldn't get it done. First coming into the last round, but things happen. We make mistakes. I'm looking to win it this year.
You did get a consolation prize for 4th place. You've won yourself, I think it was 3 tons of KFC. Is that right?
4 actually, and they were all given to me in $10 vouchers, which is pretty hilarious. So for New Year's Eve, I went and made these unfortunate KFC workers cook about $200 worth of chicken to do the catering for my New Year's Eve party. So thank you, NRL Fantasy.
That's a lot. Like $200 a KFC, right? Doesn't sound like that much, but a bucket's what, $30? So what's that? Like 7 buckets of KFC?
No, it wasn't that much. It was like 2 or 3 of the feasts, I'd say. Look, it served a decent amount of people.
Mate, the KFC king, we got him in the house. Look, let's dive right into these team lists. So we've got a few implications to talk about. Probably good to talk about some of these players as well. The first thing's up, the Cronulla Sharks, and they've named a team that has some of their starters, but a lot of guys in the forward pack who are in positions they're not going to be in round 1. Does anything jump out at you for this Cronulla team, Geordie?
No, not really. I think Cronulla is mostly like a sort of settled entity. Like there's not going to be too many changes. Obviously, Fanua Blake comes in this season, but I don't think there'll be a lot in the way of value in terms of fantasy. Maybe Nico Hines plays fullback at some point, and Atkinson or Puru gets a run. But apart from that, there's not a lot of interest there.
Yeah, Hines at fullback would be pretty weird. We were talking before a bit about Kale Iro as well. So he was super reliable down the stretch last year. You were throwing a few stats around, but he's one of those guys who, he's sort of priced out of consideration. But at the same time, he does have the profile where I think at some point in his career, probably not this year, but at some point in his career, he's going to be one of those guys who pops past 50. And if you pick it at the right time, he could be a guy that shoots you up the ranks.
Yeah, he's super elite. Like for a center, his base scores are insane. It's like almost a 40 in base. Like he went maybe 10 weeks without scoring a try and averaged over 40 during that period. And then on the run home, just blitzed it. I think he scored a try like 5 games straight and averaged almost 60. So he could definitely do that. He could have a Herbie season. Who knows?
Man, I'll throw a hypothetical at you here because some people are talking about Cronulla as that team that's going to be, top of the table. Fanua Blake's a game changer. Hines is in the best mood he's been in all week, all that sort of stuff. Could that mean that Iro gets the attacking opportunities to boost his scores up beyond that base there? Because we saw at the back end of last year when they did hit some form, he was transcendent.
Yeah, he really could. Like when Trindle came back into the side, that's actually when he started scoring a lot of tries, and maybe that helps him. But I don't think too much changes for Cronulla. They were really good last year as well during the season, not in the finals. But I don't think they get too much better, and I don't think there's a lot more attacking stats for him to pick up. He's a good buy regardless, but I don't know if I'd have him in round 1. Hopefully he drops price at some point.
Yeah, probably going more to target for draft leagues. For the rest of the Cronulla team, look, Talakai is sitting in the back row there. He's not going to get a start round 1, but if he plays off the bench for a while and then there are injuries, that sort of thing, he could be a guy to consider as a cash out later in the year. So just keep him on your radar. Going to the Warriors, backline here, 1 to 5 is not super interesting. It's pretty settled. Leia Tower, we were talking about it before, but Leia Tower is one of those guys who we've been waiting forever on, and now he's too expensive. So can't do much with that. RTS at the wing spot, I'm not that excited about. Tamari Martin and Luke Metcalf are 2 guys who are pretty touted right now. So Tamari Martin, when SJ was out last year, was pretty unbelievable for fantasy. And Luke Metcalf is being talked about as the goal kicker. Of these 2 guys, Jordan, which one are you jumping towards here?
So of the 2 of them, Metcalf is the one that is the most interesting. Like he's had a few interviews in the preseason saying, growing up, I was actually more of a dominant 7. And he did a lot of general play kicking, and he's obviously a goal kicker as well. I think he's probably the one to target. He's at a pretty nice price. A really unfortunate sort of run with injuries, but if he gets that role, there's definitely some value to be had.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think too, like people are talking about the Warriors as a team that they're sort of on the down with losing Sean Johnson and all that. But if you can isolate the Metcalf opportunity here, it's a good forward pack. It's a good service with Wade Egan there as well. So he's going to have a decent platform. And they've got some guys out wide who can run the ball. So Pompey, Leotower, both good hole runners, both tough guys to tackle. DWZ, RTS, good finishes on the edges. It's a team where he's going to have an opportunity, and it's less that he has no opportunity and more that he's going to have to be really good for the Warriors to step up. So saying that, the lights have gone out, and maybe that's a sign that he's not a guy to buy. Is he locked into your team right now?
No, he's not in my team at the moment, but certainly someone that I will be looking at closely, depending on how team lists shape up.
Yeah, juicy option there. And then forward pack here, I'm going to throw it to you. Mitch Barnett, James Fisher-Harris, a lot of talk about both of them as fantasy options. Which one of them is jumping out at you?
Well, I think Fisher-Harris is the only one of the two that actually has, I guess, the possibility of improving on last year. In his last few years at Penrith, he sort of played a few less minutes and became more of a wrecking ball type player rather than a big minute prop. You could probably expect him to feel maybe not the exact minutes Fanua Blake was playing, but more than he was playing at Penrith. And he's a pretty strong PPM guy. He's averaged 50 plus in the past. It's just whether or not you think he can actually go from, I think he's priced at 44 to about 7 points of value, which is a bit dicey. It's very on the edge for me.
Yeah, it's a tough one to swallow, but I agree with you. Like looking at other codes, so not necessarily fantasy because you've got that shallow roster, but in Dream Team, for example, Fisher-Harris is a guy I frequently grab over there through the origin period because he steps up those minutes a lot of the time through that period. So it's a bit of a simulator. A 50 average for him it could be interesting. I mean, I'm looking at this team and Dylan Walker's probably the starting lock, right? So he was averaging pretty strong minutes when he was playing there last year. Fisher-Harris, Barnett. If Barnett goes back to 70 minutes, then what are the minutes like for Fisher-Harris? Does he need heaps? If he steps up to sort of 55, 60 minutes, are you seeing that as a 50 average?
Like I said, I think it's pretty much like right on the edge. I think in some circles that I'm in, they're very high on Fisher-Harris. I think there's definitely value to be had in buying him, but I don't know if it's enough to warrant having in round one. It's very close, and it depends if Barnett's minutes drop back, who the starting edge second rowers are going to be. Like Barnett played a lot of second row last year. You'll note in this team list, there's no Jackson Ford, there's no Dylan Walker until you get a bit further down. So it really depends on what kind of side they run out in round one.
Yeah, I'm having a look at numbers here too. So last year, in games where he played more than 30 minutes, so I'm just ruling out injury games, he averaged 50 minutes and 49 points. So it's a pretty good sample size. I think the other thing to factor in here is I think Fisher-Harris will run the ball more frequently at the Warriors as well. So when you look at Penrith's front rowers, usually they don't have the run meters they'd have at other clubs because the wingers are sort of trucking it up and taking a lot of those early hit-ups. Often they're giving a bit more energy to defense in terms of line speed and that kind of thing. So Fish could be interesting. He's not in my team right now, but he's one of about 7 middle forwards where they're a guy who could make that leap into sort of the top echelon. So it could be interesting. Is there anyone else that's jumping out at you here? Jacob Laban, some people are excited about him.
Yeah, he's probably the only one in that pack aside from Fish that there is some interest in. I know Aaron Clark some people are tossing up whether he's a buy or not. I think we've sort of been through this in the past. Like he sort of always teases to become a fantasy relevant player and just it never happens. If Laban starts in the second row, I see no problems with buying him, but there's Jackson Ford, there's Murata Niokore, does Barnett play on the edge? There's a lot of competition for that spot. So you'd want to be pretty certain that he's got it for a couple of games at least to start with him.
Yeah, because he's pretty solid. Like just in terms of the eye test, he looked good last year in a team that, we're missing a few forwards. Aaron Clark's a funny one too. I think we need to make a word for this, right? Aaron Clark, we were talking about Seyfarth before as well. They're guys who typically don't hold down that spot in the roster, but there's a great stat case for them. So I know I'm going to try and think of a word for this. So Aaron Clark, if he gets named to start round one though, are you on that or are you too scarred from previous experiences?
I'd say I'm a bit too scarred from previous experiences, but he's the kind of guy where if he starts in round one and he plays like 60 minutes, it's pretty easy to just buy him in round two. He's probably even in 60 minutes not going to shoot up 100K. Like he's not the type of guy that's going to come out and score 3 tries and throw a bunch of offloads and break 12 tackles. And, he's not a Terrell May type player.
Mate. But jinxing
it. yeah, watch this space. I remember
season coming in, mate.
I remember last season we're talking about Jamin Jolliffe, and I think he went out and scored tries in 3 straight games after we said, yeah, maybe wait on him.
Yeah. He's not a try scorer. Clark. Look, there'll be a billion podcasts now that'll be like, Aaron Clark, when he plays 50 plus minutes, he averages 55 points and all this other stuff. And it is true, but there's a reason why those minutes aren't coming consistently. I just keep an eye on Dylan Walker's situation as well. That's another guy who could step in. Even Niokore on the bench, he's a guy who plays in the middle quite a bit as well. He started for Para in the middle a few times too, and he's a tough unit. So could be anything with this Warriors side. But I think that pretty much polishes them off. So you're going to say something?
Yeah, just on that one before we move on. Even if Clark starts in round 1 at lock, if Dylan Walker's on the bench, there's still a possibility that Clark plays 30 minutes and Walker plays the other 50, and they share the role.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee, even if he is starting, that he's going to be the big minute lock that people want him to be.
Oh, 100%. And they had Jazz Tavanga last year too. This is the bit that makes me not excited, because they had Jazz Tavanga in that team and they weren't using him heaps. And he sort of plays a similar, that hybrid hooker, middle forward, nuggety guy, some attacking upside. That similar role, and he didn't get big minutes. So I don't have a lot of hope for Aaron Clark.
Agreed.
All right, we'll jump down to Panthers and the Raiders. So for this one, look, we were talking about it before. I'll throw it to you here. There's a bit of a battle of the wingers, McLean versus McLean. You've got a controversial take on who's going to win that wing spot.
Well, I would like to think that Jesse is the favorite of the two. Maybe this is wishful thinking for fantasy, but he's the one that debuted first. He is more of a genuine winger than Casey is. Far more games of Casey playing in the centres. And while Casey did play for New Zealand on the wing, I think test footy is a bit different. And especially for like the Kiwi side, they were a bit low on numbers. And it's good to give the guy a run while he's still young, and he's obviously a very promising footballer himself. But it wouldn't surprise me if Jesse actually won the starting spot in round 1.
Right, that'd be huge. So I guess I've got a follow-up question to that then, because in a classic team, you're going to buy him, right? He's close to base price. You just get on that. But for a draft team, right? Last year, a lot of people invested a lot of draft equity in getting Taylor May, for example. And what we saw last year was Isaac Tungo fall off a cliff. Taylor May's production was not good, and then he just completely left the scene. Paul Alamotti, production was okay, but very attacking stat reliant, not consistent, and not what we've seen from a lot of these Penrith outside backs in the past. Yeah, are the days of Penrith and sort of being a winger or a center at Penrith being a goldmine for fantasy done, or do you think it's still a great spot to be, and Jesse McLean will be a guy who, will average sort of 40 points or even more than that?
I think part of it comes down to who's in the team. Like if it's someone like Blaze Talangi who's inside the winger, he may not get as much good ball. He may not sort of be getting fed pill like a Jerome Luai. Probably a good example is Jerome Luai. He hated his winger, hated his center. When the ball got to him, he'd run right back in field. He'd step back in and break 3 tackles, and it was great for him. But for his outside man, it was horrible. They got no ball. So yeah, watch out for who's on Cleary's side. And Talangi might be the same kind of 5'8", right? He seems like a runner. If it's someone else at 6 and they're more of like a ball distributor, then yeah, all for it. Buy a Penrith player for sure. At base price, I don't think you're going to be able to look past a Jesse McLean regardless. Yeah. But for a guy like Casey, I'd probably stay away even if he started.
Yeah, the production wasn't great. Wasn't great last year. He could make a leap, but yeah, I'm with you. I think for draft as well, I'm probably not prioritizing these guys. So it's not a case of, he's stepping in, he's going to be Brian Toe 2.0, or he's going to be, Taylor May when he was on the wing. Production was fantastic. Taruva was okay. Bit sort of hit and miss. I think that's probably more of the profile that I'd expect from McLean. If we go into the forward pack here, I'm pretty excited about this man in number 12, Isaiah Papali'i. And look, there are pros and cons to him being in this game, but Isaiah Papali'i named on the edge, hopefully that means that they view him as an edge. And hopefully when we watch this game, he plays the full game or all of his minutes at least on the edge. If we see him slide into the middle for half the game as well, or half his minutes, then I wouldn't read into this too much. But if he exclusively plays edge, that's probably a pretty good sign that he's going to play that edge role and hopefully secure some good minutes.
Yeah, look, Papali'i's a beast, man. When he was at Parramatta, he was just like so elite, fantasy-wise, on the field. Like he was such a great player, and hopefully he gets back to that. There's been some chat of Liam Martin maybe playing some minutes in the middle. So if that ends up happening, and we see Papali'i play close to 80 on an edge, he's going to be a complete stud like he used to be. He's playing in a good side. But another thing, again, it depends who his half is, which side. If he's on Cleary's side, mate, he's going to explode. If he's on Talangi or Cole's side, it's a bit different. So keep an eye out on the trials and how they line up. But there's been a bit of chat that he's actually been training on the edge. So promising signs.
If he's on the Cleary side, and like let's say he's on the Cleary side and he plays 75 plus minutes a week, would you say top back rower in fantasy? So Dave Fafita, Gus Crichton, they're sort of floating around that 60 marker in my head. Does Papali'i go past that? Because he has in the past, and this is theoretically the best team he's ever played on.
Well, I think he probably is, because Crichton sort of falls off a bit at some point in the season, almost like clockwork. And I don't think I think the days of Fafita playing 80 minutes are probably over. I can really see him sharing minutes with like a Cleese Haas or something. Whereas if Papali'i's playing 70 minutes, he's got like a 62 average or something on the edge, which like just unreasonable how good he was. And he's still young. It feels like he's been around forever. He's like 25, 26. So like, what a signing for Penrith. I can't believe Tigers let him go.
I actually hate it. I hate that he's gone there. I wish he just stayed at Parramatta the whole time. If we just offered him a 4-year contract at whatever he's been paid over this 4-year period, I'm sure it would have been a decent deal. So, yeah, that's tough. But yeah, for fantasy, it's great. In a draft league, hypothetically, because I just want to cover this too. Hypothetically, he's there, Crichton's there, Fafita's there, all the back rowers are there. Maybe Jacob Preston, you're in that sort of camp, or whoever else. John Bateman, some people are really excited about. But if they're all there and all the signs are good for Papali'i, would you take him over those guys in a draft league, or would you just sort of wait to see how it settles out and grab the one that's value, or are one of the other players a higher priority in the edge back row spot for you?
I would probably say Angus would be my number one priority of all the back rowers. I think he is basically the only one guaranteed to play 80 minutes, even including Preston. I don't think Preston will play 80 minutes every week. And the Roosters are going to struggle a bit. So we might go back to his South Sydney days where he did like a bunch of crab runs and offloads and had to make things for himself, which is, I think the Roosters will struggle this year, and that might actually benefit him rather than hinder him from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah. He's actually better at that too. That's the thing. Like, he's not just a system back rower. He's not that sort of classic whole running back rower. He's probably more like an inside center in rugby in his style of play. So yeah, that would be pretty exciting. I still reckon Papa though, and I get that it's not guaranteed. I'd probably wait and sort of see what settles out, try and get value. But if I can get Papali'i, the thing I'm excited about there is he's not going to play Origin. Gus Crichton will. So during that Origin period, you get a lot more production out of Papa. But at the same time, I do see what you're saying. Now I've got visions in my head of Gus Crichton running across the field and flicking an offload to someone like 8 times a game. That changes things. That does.
Food for thought, right? Food for thought. And I know me and you are both massive fans of that version of Angus Crichton. Yeah. And the Roosters have kind of dulled that down a little, which I completely hate.
Bring it back. Rest of this Penrith team, though. So, I'm looking at the rest of it. There's nothing else really to comment on. So we jump across to the Raiders here. For this Raiders side, I'll throw a few things out. You can drop some things in too. But Matty Nicholson, number 12 jersey. This isn't necessarily of interest for your fantasy side. You're probably not going to start with him round 1. If you had a dynasty league, you'd consider him, but no one plays dynasty fantasy yet until someone brings that out. I just think he's a guy to keep an eye on. So if you're watching this game, Matty Nicholson, number 12 jersey, he's probably the guy that they're touting to be their long-term back rower. He definitely is a threat to some Hosking minutes. If he looks completely out of his depth and garbage, then that makes Hosking a bit better this year. But if he looks good, then probably takes Hosking off your radar, and it's just sort of a view into the future there. Do you agree with that? Do you think he's a threat to Hosking there, or do you think there's another way this could play out?
I definitely think so. Like, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword with him being named to this team, right? It really
Yep.
depends on what actually happens in this trial. So it might be worth actually watching because if he's there
Yeah.
and he plays like 80 minutes in the back row, that might be a sign that they're trying to get some minutes into his legs and get him match fit. If
Yeah.
he only plays like half a game or something, then you can probably expect him to maybe just be that sort of bench second rower. Um,
Mm.
and the same can be said for Albert Hopper. He is probably in Canberra's best side, maybe, but
Yep.
he's playing in this trial because he can't play in round one. So it's interesting. I would keep an eye on this Canberra side and the minutes they play.
I guess the other thing I'll throw in here too is Ethan Sanders is named here. There was a little bit of chat that Ethan Sanders could come in over Strange, and Strange would go to center. There's been a few conversations there. I think their best team has Strange in it with Fogarty, and I think Ethan Sanders is that replacement for Fogarty in a bit of a longer term play. But I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this as well.
I fully agree with that. I think Sanders is an out and out seven. If Fogarty goes down, I think that's when he'll come into the side. But Strange is a really good player. Like he's super
Yeah.
promising and he's really young and he's tough. Like I think he'll be their
Mm.
starting six. I don't get the center argument. Yeah, I get he had the center dual position last year.
Yep.
Doesn't mean he's going to play center in first grade,
Do
right?
you reckon
Like
that's where it's come from?
I think
People see the
so.
position on the app and they're like, "Oh yeah, he'll play center."
Well, yeah, honestly, because he played nothing but six last year, right? So I
Yeah.
think he is their six. And if anyone is going to drop out of the squad, it's probably Fogarty, like rather than
Yep.
Strange.
And he was good. He was good. They love Jack Whiten up there. He's a bit of a Jack Whiten 2.0. Like
100%.
he's fine. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think the other thing is like people talk about, statistically he was comically low on kick meters and that kind of thing. There's plenty of halves out there who are like that. So a Mitch Moses Dylan Brown combo. If you view Sanders as that long term pure seven, then a guy like Strange right next to him is perfect. Or Strange next to Fogarty. Fogarty is that pure seven as well. It makes a lot of sense. And then KO Weeks goes back to fullback, which actually I'll throw this at you. Do you think KO Weeks is interesting at all in a draft league to stash? Like, do you think that big, like he had some big plays last year that sort of boosted his scores up, but the base is really weak. Do you see that jumping this year, or do you think KO Weeks is a guy just not to really have on your radar?
See, I think that's a good point. He had so many games where he looked like he was about to score 10 points and then just
Yeah.
scored a try out of nowhere. Which I don't think is sustainable. I don't think he's a particularly good fantasy scorer, and it's
Yep.
something you sort of find with rookies a lot. Is teams don't know what they're going to do, what they're about. Like KO Weeks is not going to get away with as much as he got away with last season. Teams are going to be scouting him coming into games now. They know that he loves running and going himself, and teams are going to be a bit more aware of that. And that's why you see like the sort of rookie second year syndrome type thing that happens with a lot of young players. It's not necessarily that they got worse; it's that other teams are now on top of what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, I guess that's where coaches come in, right? Drop some new plays, throw some new looks in. But yeah. Okay, so these team lists, I gotta be honest, there's not heaps in this, right? There's a bit of confirmation for Isaiah Papali'i. There's an interesting battle between the McLean brothers for that wing spot. There's a conversation about Sanders. If he plays lights out footy, there maybe he does push into some sort of role. There's the Matty Nicholson sort of academic exercise of watching him. And then for the Sharks, there's nothing. And for the Warriors, it's probably having a look at, I guess, just how they play, who passes the eye test, who looks good. A lot of these spots are up for grabs. So there are certain guys who, if they play lights out footy, could sneak into a team. But yeah, do you have anything else you want to add here? I mean, one guy I'm going to be watching closely, we talked about already, Luke Metcalf is probably my number one to watch this weekend, just to see if he's at least at 50-50 kicking. But other than that, I'm not, too hot on anything else here for the Warriors and Sharks game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think watch the kicking sort of distribution between Metcalf and Martin. I strongly suspect that Metcalf will do the majority of the kicking. Martin's not a very strong kicker at all. A couple of times he put the ball either dead or in goal 10 meters away from everyone last year, and it really hurt them. So I think Metcalf is about the eye test, and I know me and you are really big on the eye test. If he looks like a natural kicker and he's, putting the ball into the right spots, kicking to corners well, then, you could very well start with him and he could be a very profitable guy to own. So, yeah, that's probably the only one I'm interested in this game.
All right, keep an eye on Metcalf, guys. That's the word. We'll come back next week. We'll do a bunch of analysis on this and sort of at least some notes from those trial games. Look, trials aren't like don't overread into trials. I think is the final bit of advice here. But at the same time, you can pick up a vibe, right? If a guy looks out of his depth, pick that up. If a guy looks really good, pick that up. Doesn't usurp everything, but it is important to know. Thanks for jumping on, Jay-Z. Yeah. We'll see you again soon, mate.
Cheers, mate.